Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're bringing you a truly unbelievable biographical story that honestly sounds like it was ripped straight out of a Hollywood script. We're talking staggering battlefield bravery, near impossible survival, and above all else, absolute, selfless humility. We are going to explore the life of Bill Crawford. To most of the people around him, he was just a humble janitor, but he was actually holding on to one of our nation's absolute highest honors. So get ready, because this is an inspiring journey you're definitely not going to forget.
Okay, let's dive into this. I really want you to picture the scene here. It's the mid-1970s at the United States Air Force Academy. An Air Force cadet named James Moshket is just sitting in his room reading a book about World War II, specifically about the incredibly tough Allied march up the Italian peninsula. He's reading this detailed account of a wildly brave soldier who earned the Medal of Honor. The soldier's name? William J. Crawford. And suddenly it just clicks. Moshket looks over at his roommate and drops a total bombshell. He says, "I think our janitor wears the Medal of Honor." No way, right? But it was true. That unassuming, quiet older man who spent his day sweeping the cadets' floors and cleaning their toilets was literally an American legend. To understand how a legendary hero ended up pushing a broom, well, we have to go back to the very beginning.
Let's trace Crawford's scrappy upbringing. He was born in the tough, working-class steel town of Pueblo, Colorado. And man, this was not an easy childhood. When he was just a few months old, his mother actually passed away. Raised by his father and grandparents, he had to learn how to fend for himself super early on. He grew up working on a farm, hunting, fishing, and just becoming incredibly comfortable in the wilderness. He even became a Golden Gloves boxing champion in high school. Now, these weren't just fun hobbies, these were absolute survival skills. And as we hit that final point on the timeline, 1942, when a 20-year-old Bill Crawford is drafted into the U.S. Army, those scrappy Pueblo Roots, his ability to handle a rifle, and that raw fighting spirit were about to be tested on a massive global stage.
So Crawford gets assigned to the 36th Infantry Division. They were known as the T-Patchers, a unit that was originally made up of Texas National Guardsmen. By April 1943, they had arrived in North Africa and reached fighting trim. But their real baptism by fire? That came on September 9th, 1943. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, under the pitch-black cover of darkness, Crawford and his fellow soldiers stormed the beaches at Salerno, Italy, and it was just brutal. We're talking exploding landmines, massive tangles of concertina wire, and these blazing machine gun tracers from German tanks and 88mm artillery just waiting for them on the ridges. It was a completely terrifying introduction to combat, but Crawford survived it, and he pushed inland.
Section 1. The Crucible. Assault on Hill 424.
Just 4 days after that fierce Salerno invasion, on September 13th, Crawford's division is tasked with taking a vital strong point called Hill 424. The situation gets dire fast. Crawford was acting as the point scout for the 3rd Platoon of Company I. The second they crested the hill, an overwhelming amount of well-camouflaged enemy machine gun fire just erupted. They were completely pinned down. In the chaos, Crawford's platoon sergeant, who was also a good friend of his, dives behind a rock wall right next to him, but his friend had been hit and was killed instantly. Now, Crawford is upset, obviously, but he doesn't freeze. Without waiting for orders, operating on pure adrenaline and sheer instinct, he takes action. To avoid the blazing gunfire, he actually sheds his heavy gear, dumps his gas mask, and squeezes into this tiny, narrow ditch. It was just 18 inches wide and 4 feet deep. Like a hunter back in the Colorado wilderness, he literally begins to stalk the enemy snipers.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tactical, deeply calculated bravery of what Crawford did next. He didn't just blindly charge in. He dismantled the enemy position step by step. First, he crawls to within 15 yards of the first nest, lobs a perfectly placed hand grenade right into the dugout, and completely destroys the gun and its 3 crew members. But there were 2 more hidden nests still firing at his company. So, for step 2, he crawls even closer, now fully exposed to the enemy, and takes out the second nest using nothing but his M1 rifle, because he was too close to safely throw a grenade. Finally, step 3. He targets the last nest with another barrage of grenades. The surviving German soldiers break and run into the forest. And Crawford, he actually dives into the destroyed nest, grabs the enemy's own weapon, and fires at the fleeing forces. In a matter of minutes, making split-second, life-or-death decisions, he single-handedly eliminated 3 machine gun nests and essentially saved his entire company.
But here is the massive twist in our story, because Crawford disappeared during a furious German counterattack right after his heroic actions. The army just presumed he was dead. President Harry Truman even presented a posthumous Medal of Honor to Crawford's father back in Colorado. But the reality? Crawford wasn't dead. After saving his company, he had rushed over to help a wounded buddy who'd been shot in the stomach. He was frantically applying sulfa powder to stop the bleeding. And while doing this, a German company surrounded them. A German soldier with a machine gun was staring right down at Crawford's abandoned gas mask. Crawford actually had his rifle aimed right at the man's head, but something inside him told him not to pull the trigger. He surrendered, strictly to save his wounded friend, and was taken as a prisoner of war.
Section 2. 19 Months in the Dark. Life as a POW. Crawford vanished into the brutal reality of the German POW system. And incredibly, he later admitted he felt deeply depressed when he was captured because he mistakenly believed he had, in his own words, let his country down. I mean, can you believe that? The man had literally just wiped out 3 machine gun nests by himself, yet his biggest fear was that he hadn't done enough. Surviving those 19 months tested every single ounce of grit he'd built up back in Pueblo. He was transported to a camp in Hammerstein, Germany, and put to work on a farm as an ox driver. But he wasn't broken. In fact, those high school boxing skills we mentioned earlier, they definitely came in handy. One day, a notoriously abusive Nazi guard tried to pick a fight with Bill. Well, that guard picked the wrong guy. You simply do not mess with a Golden Gloves champ from Pueblo. Crawford beat the living heck out of him. But the real test came in the winter of 1944. As the Russian army closed in, the Germans forced the POWs on a brutal, freezing 500-mile march to the west. Crawford survived near starvation, living on virtually nothing but a single potato a day until they were finally liberated in April 1945.
When Crawford finally came home, he didn't seek the spotlight. He didn't demand any parades. The medal had already been given to his father, and Crawford just quietly stayed in the army. He served as a recruiter and eventually retired as a master sergeant. He was highly respected, even serving as a pallbearer for the unknown soldier in 1958. But what did he do after retiring? He took a job as a custodian, a janitor, at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. He took the job simply because he loved being around young military people. He never bragged. He never told anyone what he did. He just quietly swept the floors.
And that brings us right back to Cadet James Moshgat, who later became an Air Force colonel. When Moshgat and the other cadets realized their janitor was a literal American legend, it profoundly changed them. Just listen to this quote. "Bill gave more than many of us thought we would ever be required to do. His presence made us stop and think about what it truly meant to serve." Bill Crawford taught those young cadets more about selfless leadership by pushing a broom with dignity than they could have ever possibly learned from a textbook. He was a mentor and he was a friend.
Section 3. The Overdue Honor. May 30th, 1984. Now, what's really interesting about this is it sets up a moment 40 years in the making.
It had been over 40 years since Crawford's unbelievable actions on Hill 424. Because he was a POW when his medal was initially awarded to his father, Bill Crawford himself had never actually had the Medal of Honor placed around his neck by a President of the United States, which is the customary tradition. While the Air Force Academy decided it was time to fix that. At the 1984 Air Force Academy graduation ceremony, amidst this massive sea of patriotic red, white, and blue, the Commander-in-Chief himself, President Ronald Reagan, took the stage. Reagan actually stopped the ceremony. He told the crowd that a grateful nation had bestowed a medal on a soldier who couldn't accept it because he was a prisoner of war. Then Reagan looked out and said, "Well, nearly 40 years have gone by and it's time to do it right." He called Bill Crawford forward. And right there, in front of thousands of cheering cadets, President Reagan finally placed the Medal of Honor around the neck of the unassuming janitor. It was the emotional climax of a story 4 decades in the making.
The legacy of Bill Crawford is totally unique. When he passed away, he received an honor that speaks volumes about how much the cadets loved him. He and his wife are the only non-Air Force-related people ever interred at the Air Force Academy Cemetery. He's remembered as the ultimate unassuming all-American hero, a man whose towering battlefield courage was matched only by his absolute, selfless humility in civilian life. And today, in his hometown of Pueblo, Colorado, which is proudly known as the Home of Heroes, his legacy stands tall alongside 3 other Medal of Honor recipients from that very same city.
So we want to leave you with this provocative thought. Take a look around you. Bill Crawford was the guy cleaning the toilets, yet he was a titan of history. It really makes you wonder, right? Who are the quiet, unassuming heroes walking among us in our own communities today? Who out there is serving with quiet integrity without ever demanding recognition? Keep your eyes open and never, ever underestimate the people you interact with every single day. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. We really hope Crawford's story inspires you as much as it inspires us.